We're joined now by one of the reporters who broke this story for The Washington Post. Ellen Nakashima is a national security reporter for The Washington Post. Ellen, thank you very much for joining us tonight with this breaking news. One of the things I notice in the law is that it says the Inspector General has a duty to communicate with the employee. The Inspector General has a duty to let the employee know what has happened. So it's entirely possible that the employee knows what has happened before reading it in your newspaper tonight.
It's possible. We did contact the whistleblower's attorney, who had no comment, on the story. So we assume that, certainly by now the whistleblower knows.
And what is the reporting that has narrowed this down to the information appears to involve the President of the United States?
Well, first of all, if you take a look at the letters that were exchanged by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the General Counsel there, Jason Klatanik, and the Hill, as well as letters from Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, back to DNI Joseph Maguire, it's quite clear. They point, the way the letters specify that first of all, the whistleblower is someone inside the intelligence community reporting conduct by someone who is not inside the intelligence community, and that conduct could also potentially involve privileged communications. That narrows it down already pretty much to, there's really only one entity in the U.S. government outside the intelligence community that might have access to such sensitive information and can claim privilege over it, and that's the White House. And at that point, yes, a limited set of people at the White House. And then from there, we've got sources we spoke to, including 2 former U.S. officials who confirmed for us that the complaint involved a phone call or involved a communication that Trump had with a foreign leader and a promise of some sort, and one of those former officials said it was a phone call in recent months.
And you have reporting in your story that indicates that the acting director of national intelligence, Maguire, is torn, is not pleased with what the Justice Department has done in its intervention in this case, and is not pleased with what the White House has done.
Well, what we know, what we're hearing is, first of all, the acting DNI, Joseph Maguire, is not someone who was angling for this job. He was kind of put into it after DNI Daniel Coates was, basically was asked to resign, and then his deputy, Sue Gordon, was also sort of asked to resign, and so there was a vacancy. He got tapped. It wasn't something he was looking for. He's not a career intelligence, a person who came up through the spy ranks, let's say. And here he is, new to the job, and he's thrust into this very politically perilous situation. And this is not something, he's not a lawyer. He's very much not familiar with this issue, and we're told he's not. He feels sort of caught between his competing instincts.
I want to quote your reporting on why he has not complied with what appears to be the requirements of the law. It says your reporting says the DNI has asserted that lawyers determined there was no notification requirement because the whistleblower complaint did not constitute an urgent concern that was within the responsibility and authority of Maguire's office. Do you have any indication where they got what was the basis of that legal opinion? Because I can't find anything in the law that would point to.
If you look at the statute, there is a line in where they define urgent concern, and urgent concern involves a flagrant abuse of power problem that is relating to an intelligence activity that is, within the responsibility and authority of the Director of National Intelligence. And I believe that's where they got that. However, it seems apparent to me that the IG, the Inspector General for the intelligence community, determined that this was an intelligence community activity within the purview of the ODNI, and therefore this was something that, you know, he could take a look at.
Did your sources have any indication of who the president could have been in contact with?
We did not get any indication or confirmation of that, and that's something we're continuing to report on.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.